Hi, and welcome to another Well Workplaces podcast episode. My name's Tom Bosner, the host, and today I'm speaking again with Poppy Griffiths. Poppy, how are you?
I'm great, Tom. Lovely to be here with you. How are you?
Yes, fantastic. I'm doing my thing on a Tuesday, my creative day, which is good fun for me. So yeah, great to talk to you again. Today we're going to just continue on the topic of working parents, but talk about it from a little bit of a different angle. So we're going to talk about how to find better balance and happiness as a dual career couple. Okay, so dual career, I'll be honest, it's probably the first time I've heard that word used, but it makes sense. Two people having a career in sync, whilst maybe being parents as well, is comes with a lot of challenges. Funnily enough, today in my household, she's in the back area doing work. I'm in my son's room doing this. And somehow between all that, we're managing a couple of kids and also running a business and other bits and pieces. So it comes with a lot of challenges. Yeah. And finding, I guess, doing it and finding balance is almost makes me sort of laugh because it never feels balanced. But finding that sort of that happiness between the couple is really important. So really love to, I guess, sort of tackle this via your intellect and your interest in this topic. So I guess it's probably best to start with what are some of the key strategies for couples to kind of that are both working to, achieve better success, but also happiness as a combined entity?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. And I think too,
Big
again,
question.
it is a big question, and hopefully we can talk about break it down. And I guess my aim
Yeah.
is to be able to provide people with a couple of ideas, right, that they can walk away with and try. And you're right, like as when we both work, when you're in a couple relationship and your dual career, meaning both of you work in some capacity, I think everyone knows that the pressures of both working and trying to run a household and working from home in your son's bedroom, which I always love as a background. It's hard to achieve that career advancement, that harmony as a family, and happiness personally and as a couple. And each of us will go through various transitions in our work life as working parents. And I've actually looked at there's a psychologist in America. Her name's, I can never say her surname well, but Petra Galleri. I'd say she has some Italian background, perhaps. She's actually conducted this 6-year study with about 1,000 dual career, so both working couples, really from like right through from their 20s right through to their 60s. And there's sort of 3 common questions that have been identified that are really common, like regardless of life stage in that 40-year period. And these are 3 questions that are really helpful, I think, to ask ourselves when we are trying to navigate and sometimes feel like we compete with one another. We're frustrated with our partner. We get the raw end of the deal. One of us is succeeding potentially and the other isn't. And then for some, they make it work really well. So, but 3 questions that we can ask. She talks about values, boundaries, and fears. And so by way of this, like values, we need to, as a couple, define the direction of each of our paths and of our path together. And then I think by way of boundaries, this is very much setting like the borders of our path, like as a family and as a dual career, like what are the boundaries that we need to put in place? And I think communicating our fears is really important here because let's be honest, like when it is high pressure, actually having that open conversation to reveal, the potential cliffs that you both want to avoid is really helpful. So you can think about answering these questions yourself as an individual first. That's sometimes a good way to start. And then share your reflections with one another. And I think when we're thinking about values, this is very much around like, what are the choices and actions that we're making in our everyday? And do we feel that they align with our values? And when there's 2 of you involved, because you're both working, it's even more important to discuss these things. For example, if you both value family, possibly neither of you should be working 70, 80-hour work weeks. So, asking each other things like, what as an individual makes you happy and proud, what gives you satisfaction, what makes for a good life. When we ask these things of one another, we sometimes we get answers that we probably didn't expect. We think we know each other, and yet we don't necessarily truly know our values. And I think boundaries is another really big one. Like, when we have clear boundaries, we can make decisions much more easily and make more decisions easily together. This is even thinking about like places that you'd like to live and work. As a couple, do you take the time to share that? Is there places that you'd prefer to avoid, relocating or moving? I think even the boundaries around like how much work is too much. Understanding obviously that work ebbs and flows, but like, do you have that honest discussion as a couple around, what amount of work is too much? And I know, for example, for my husband and my husband travels a lot for work, and he was in a routine of basically traveling every second week for 2 days, and that just was not working for our family. And by way of talking about boundaries, we renegotiated. Now, it doesn't work always, but we sort of renegotiated how that could be done. And he now travels more or less every third week, and possibly for an extra day, but it works better for our family. So that was just a renegotiation of boundaries. And I think fears, as I mentioned, it just not communicating to each other about what you're worried about when it comes to your career and a happy relationship, that really extinguishes and prevents, blow up before it enters dangerous territory. So, do you actually take the time to ask each other, like, what are your concerns? What are you fearing about our relationship and how our careers are interacting? Or even as simple as like, what do you wish is different about, how we're working and living as a family? I think just really taking the time to drill into what's important to you, where the boundaries need to be, and be honest about, what are your fears with one another. It's a really great way to start to alleviate those pressures when you both work.
Sounds like a good date night, doesn't it? This getting through this work. Yeah.
Sometimes though, you do have to, this isn't always go out to dinner, enjoy it over a bottle of wine, make it fun. Like, because sometimes this stuff can seem a bit like, oh God, we're going to schedule in these discussions. But to begin, sometimes maybe you just have to, and then it becomes more of a natural, informal discussion because you are more honest and communicative with each other.
Yeah. No, they're really good topics to talk about. I really like the fears one. I feel like that's something that, probably, before getting married, this whole thing feels like a great exercise before people get married, because you do see, or you might have, people that or friends with. The real solution for the couple is communication in inverted commas, but having that a bit more structure around what they're going to talk about, starting with values and ending in fears. Even just touching on a couple of those would create a lot of open the communication door up, so to speak, and it would make, assuming that there's respect on both sides, would make for a great conversation and maybe some healthy changes for the relationship.
Tom, is really, you're right. But showing obviously, your values and your fears takes vulnerability in the first instance. And I think, it takes courage to, possibly be the first person to do that. And obviously as a couple, it's really important, that you have that, I guess, mutual permission to be vulnerable with one another, and be honest and respectful, and see how you go. So a couple of ideas that people could try.
Yeah, perfect. And it kind of make this topic overall, and I was saying this just before we started, it just makes me sometimes think of those couples that are probably struggling with maybe a power dynamic kind of, or maybe not power dynamic, probably the wrong word, but just that thing of, I've got it's a bit old school, but that I'm the breadwinner, and kind of that thing of my career is more important than yours because it does this for the family. So I know that's maybe old school thinking, but I still feel like that exists. So this framework of how to have a conversation underlying all that, you need respect, but you need that communication door to be open, so that you don't, jump,
don't
fall off
fall
those
down
cliffs.
and fall into the well. I think a lot of like sort of anything that's about preventative and, performing well and being happy as a family, it does take it takes effort up front. So, you know, these are ideas around like what can you do up front so that you are navigating that career well. And of course, like make changes. It doesn't always, you know, what we thought, you know, 1 year may not work the next. So it's, yeah, absolutely something, you know, much like setting your goals and things, like it's something that you've got to revisit. But being open to have the conversation, as you said, is important.
And I love the example of your husband and just that sort of that slight edit of the travel. I'd imagine that would be you know, a constant conversation for a lot of people. I used to do a little bit of, maybe not as much as that, but probably a bit of travel a couple of years ago when we could, up and down to Sydney quite a bit. It was kind of exhausting. Didn't really enjoy it. I like seeing our team up there, but it sort of put a bit of strain on our family, just because it only, you know, it created extra work for my wife Candice, who also works pretty, you know, full on sort of job. So anyway, just creating, you know, editing those routines is that was a really nice practical solution. I'm wondering, Poppy, if people are like, if they get into that first conversation, or, you know, they have multiple conversations around behaviors, boundaries, values, and fears. I'm wondering the next step there is probably around creating those goals, those personal and those family goals. What's the best way to go about that? Have you got any suggestions there?
Yeah, that's a nice segue, Tom, because I think naturally when you're having that conversation, it's often, as you said, because you both have ambitions or goals that you know want to get to in your career, or that you expect that you uphold as a family, and you know, when you both work, setting goals together and as a family is even more important, right? Because that's how everyone's going to succeed, and that's how you're going to keep your happiness in check. Funnily enough, actually, I was reading some stuff recently that said 49% of families that goal set together actually achieve their goals. Whereas you think of goal setting, right, in a traditional sense, most of us just do it as individuals. And we certainly often don't. We may share it with our bosses and our teams, but we often don't share our goals with our family. And there, you know, what I read actually said that for individuals that don't share their goals with family, only 17% have achieved them. So, like, even by way of looking at those numbers, you know, it's worth giving it a go, giving your goal a go.
Yeah,
so, yeah. How do you goal set as a family? You know, it's an interesting one. I say hold regular family powwows. So, you know, we all know it's healthy to check in with one another. Sometimes you do maybe need to make, as you know, a set time just to begin that kickoff conversation, rather than sort of trying to do it haphazardly. You know, you need to probably, as a couple, and involve the kids if they're old enough, you know, about what each of your goals are, and share them, because that's really important. I think also talking about the habits that you need to adopt to achieve those goals is also really helpful. And discussing how each of you within the family can actually help others achieve their goals, because you're going to get more buy-in when you're each obviously, you know, helping one another. Essentially what you're doing is creating, I'd say, a vision for success, and you're getting the most important people in your lives to buy in. So hopefully that's a recipe for success. I think setting joint goals is really important too. So what do you want to actually achieve as a family? I know in our family, outdoor activity is really important as a whole family. We all like different activities, but being active is probably core, and it is core to each of us. So we mix up what we do based on what the kids want to do and what I want to do and what Ben, my husband, wants to do. But we make sure that is a priority and that's a goal in our weeks, and we make sure that work and life is integrated in a way that sees us achieve that, which, you know, brings us happiness. The other thing I'd just add is, like, it's really important that we hold ourselves accountable. Right. So constructive feedback absolutely can be hard to hear, hardest when it's coming from your kids, and especially with those closest to us, from our partner. But finally, I mean, my older two kids are old enough now to be able to even ask them, you know, what are one or two things that I'm doing, you know, this week or this month or whatever, that's like you're feeling I'm falling short on achieving our goals together, or a family, or equally, where do you think as a mum I'm succeeding? Like, and of course I get some very humorous responses.
Yeah.
not always beautiful responses. Even when I'm asking them, what's one thing I can do better, I think, oh God, what's going to come out? But funnily enough, at the dinner table, our kids really buy in to this and holding each other accountable. I think the most important thing is that it's building this mutual respect, and the kids in this process actually feel quite validated and heard as well, and they enjoy it. Like it's become just an informal, casual, nice conversation in our family.
Yeah. I love that. It's like a high performance meeting over dinner with the family. No, it's really, yeah, power. No, I'm only joking. I think it's like a really good point there is how much time do we spend talking about goal setting in a business sort of environment, and you might do your annual personal development plan and look at it quarterly with your manager, or perhaps you are the manager and you're kind of running that. But I would say a lot of people just don't have it set up for home, and it really makes sense that if you are sharing that, it creates a good conversation over dinner, but also by sharing it, you're putting it out there. You are actually immediately accountable, because you're then going to be like, the family's going to hold you to it, or push you along the way. It's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think everyone enjoys the process of supporting others to achieve their goals and just be aware of them. I mean, too often we just don't know. We don't know what the kids' priorities are or what's most important to them, and they don't know what's most important to us as adults. And it's important that that's two-way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, with all that, what do you think? So, for working parents, what's some of the barriers or things that get in the way from them making time for that kind of goal setting, and also having that good conversation as a couple? What's getting in the way there most of the time?
I think, look, to be honest, it's probably a few things here. We don't probably take the time to set the super clear goals
Mm,
with one another. It's just like literally making the time. So none of us are going to go anywhere, right? Achieving our goals if we can't identify and share what they are. So I think times just to set the goals is really important. Um, I think too, sometimes it is also, and this is in the realm too, probably you could look at this in the realm of your family, but also goals in the sense of your career as well. Like, do you actually take the time to analyze how you are spending your time to achieve your goals? So, think about, what are you doing in your everyday as a family? What are you doing in your everyday at work? As what you're doing, is that actually aligned with your objectives, or is it misaligned? And naturally, in a career sense, when you get more senior in your job, it sometimes can be quite hard to always, say no to things when you're under a lot of demand and pressure to perform. And likewise, as a family, when you have a lot on your plate, it can be hard not to get caught up in, spending your time doing things on lots of little stuff. But I think it's really important that we each, really forensically analyze how we actually spend our time. We don't do that enough, and we're too busy doing so much stuff that's actually misaligned with goals. And then communication. Look, I'm a huge one on communication. I think over communication is better, right? Like if you're worried about, like, have I communicated enough? Sometimes over communication is better. Like, again, share what your aspirations are with your family. In a career sense, like, share your aspirations with your boss and your
mm.
leaders. We all basically are in the driver's seat around, crafting how we want our careers to go or how we'd like our families to be. So it's really important that we over communicate what our needs are and our desires with our partners, with our kids, and with those that we work with. They're obviously there as well to support us. And I think when we over communicate, we actually reduce the mental load and the stress and the worry. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and I think course correct. Like, I think of course correct, almost sounds like sports term, but course correct. When it goes wrong, like, don't panic, because, like, it goes wrong as a family, your goals get tripped up, in a career sense, what you're aspiring to doesn't work out. Like, but when it goes wrong, like, don't panic. Like, sometimes we think that we're not capable of achieving more or taking on more, or achieving the goal because we've had a bit of a dead end. But just course correct. Have a think about what you could be doing differently, where your resources are. If any boundaries need to change, because when we do course correct, we can get it right.
That's great, and the course correction, love that terminology because it makes you think of we're just gonna slightly correct something, and it's not a panic and shit, we need to do the whole goal setting right from the start again. So it's kind of you probably go up to your conversation again at the values, boundaries, fears kind of there, and just see if something's changed maybe, and to then course correct, as you say.
Yeah.
Poppy, I'm just wondering, for working parents, do you have any other, I guess, bits of advice? What are your, I guess, 10 cents of advice?
Oh, my 10 cents of advice. 10 cents. My big one here is make time for others and really build your support network, right? So as working parents, it's so important that we don't try and go it alone. I think often, especially when you're a dual career and you're both working, can seem like you're on this treadmill of work, get home, children, get back to work, the next day, children. I think it's really important that we actually engage with other parents really regularly, and how we do that is important too. So it's easy, I think, especially when you work full time, to sort of feel like you're always banging away at projects and you're eating at your desk and no time for chit chat. Like, how can you actually even change that with the working parents that you work with? And at school, and I know I'm so guilty of this too often, is like that flying through the door to pick up and drop off. We have this guilt that we're probably not around enough for our kids, and we're not necessarily forming those deep connections that we'd like with other working parents. And I think we've got to watch out sometimes when we're so busy working and so busy running at life that, we're not taking the time to build those really important deep relationships, because they're actually our key. That's the long-term success, right, to the work-life juggle. It absolutely is. So, like, to not be in a rush as much and to allow that weekly coffee check-in with other working parents that you work with, or working parents in your community at school. I think forming those habits and making the time for that, you're going to benefit tenfold, rather than the minuscule amount of time that you've lost from not completing something, on the never-ending task list. So I think making the time to engage is really important. And, when we reciprocate with others and, we do things for other working parents, for example, and invest in those networks, it comes around tenfold in what we get from it. I think also making the time to ask for help and support, especially as mums. I know I'm guilty of this. Like, we're so keen to prove that we can do it all, but get comfortable with asking for help. And psychologists will tell you time and time again that, people that ask for help in a work setting are often the most trusted, because executives, senior executives, managers know that they can trust them because they're willing to ask for help. And I know too, in a personal, social sense, people love being asked for help. Too often we're too fearful to ask for help. So make the ask. And I think learn from others is the other one. Like, who have you got in your professional and personal network that's in a similar situation to you? How can you make some time to, reach out to them? Who's 5 or 10 years ahead of you in the journey? Like, what can they share with you? I think being really open. I'm big on working parents supporting other working parents. Like, share your tips, share your hacks, take the time to do that.
Yeah, that's great. And sometimes chatting with that person who's 5 years ahead of you, that with the kids, maybe that with their children much older, it's kind of like, you kind of get that reassurance that this phase will change and you'll be in a, the school, if you're going from, say, the daycare to kindergarten to the school age and then into high school, there's different phases for the kids as well, which then changes the way that you also parent, but also how you probably manage the work and the home life as well.
Yeah, and it gives you that long-term view. I think you're right on that, Tom. Like, it allows you to see forwards into that, back to like what your end game is and what you're working towards, rather than getting caught up in that overwhelm and guilt of the day to day. I know, funnily enough, I was just thinking of a story when you said that. I was in the playground last year with this beautifully grounded, wise, stay-at-home mum at the moment who's got, 4 very young children. And I was in such a flap about work and the time I was not spending with kids, and, always being too busy and feeling like the mix was out of whack. And like and really that, I wasn't being a good friend, so to speak, to the children. And, she just turned to me point blank and said, Poppy, it's not your job to be their friend. Your job is to make them a better person. And like for me in that example, I was getting in such a panic about, actually not, here am I as a busy working mum and, not doing right by my children. And she's like, keep your eyes on the prize, right? Your job is to make them a better person, and you're doing a great job at that. And like, I felt instantly reassured by that advice that I'd received. And I've, I probably have shared it 10 times having it. So yeah,
That's
learn
great.
from others.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think as well with just getting that extra support, sort of fueling that support in your community can help you a lot. Some examples of that, like that are quite practical, I guess, is that I was away last week and my mum was here looking after my kids and doing the school drop off. And basically every parent that had seen me the week before they knew that it was coming, and they were like, oh, if your mum needs help with, this and that. So everyone was reaching out to and also chatting with my mum when she arrived at school, just to show her what to do and all that. And I was just like, I was actually like, that is just amazing, because everyone's out reaching out to help. And we also asked for some help, but just by that one little that example, I guess it just makes us feel extra supported in where we live. And as a couple that is also doing juggling like everyone else with the work thing as well, it just makes it a lot easier. You have more confidence in, I guess, the people around you to help you, and so that it'll reinforce if we need help in future. You just be like, yeah, need some help. So
it's so true. I call that like your A-team parenting support group. And like for your mum in that instance, it was so, of course, like, reciprocity makes the world go round. So I have no doubt that, she benefited, you guys benefited enormously, and you recognize the value of it. And likewise, you're more inclined to do that for others. So it's really important to know who that parenting support crew is. I think the only other thing I was going to say too is, like, let's not burn out being perfectionist parents. I think a lot of the time, like, we're high ambitions, dual career, happy families, like we burn out on everything needing to be perfect all the time. And I think it's much better to be investing sustainably in our kids and not necessarily trying not to sweat the small stuff as much. Like, one bad week doesn't make us bad parents. We need to essentially worry less and just be consistent. I think that's really important. And I also say that because from a well-being point of view, if we're so busy trying to be perfectionists and, hustling to have that best sort of that sense of worth that we're doing a good job in our families and our careers, our well-being suffers. And I've always said, like, as a working parent, we're hopeless to everybody around us if we don't look after ourselves first. So, really don't beat yourself up on a bad week, worry less, be consistent, try not to sweat the small stuff as much, because the problem is the problem and we're all facing it.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that as a finisher, Poppy. I think that sort of rounds out the conversation really well. And yeah, we all need to avoid the perfectionist curse for sure. And maybe that goes a little bit against the dual career sort of couple, or that's probably the biggest challenge maybe.
It's called
Thanks.
Healthy striving. I like to say healthy striving instead of.
Love it. That's great reframing. Poppy, thanks so much for your time today, and look forward to chatting soon.
It's great, Tom. Thanks for having me.
See ya.